Dante and Dante's Inferno when he goes down to the first circle, and the great poets of antiquity are there, Virgil and Homer and folks like that. They tell him, "Yes, you are one of our number. You're part of the club." So I don't know, and I don't know. I mean, Chaucer did know Dante. I mean, knew his work, didn't know him personally. So I don't know if that's an allusion to that. But yeah, I think Chaucer is being funny when he does that. As you say, when the eagle said, "You're dumb as a stone," and you stare at books until you're dazed, and you live like a hermit. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Um, yeah, and you're right. It is a dream. I think this is his dream, or for the narrator anyway. For the narrator, his dream is to be a great author, supporting great truths and insights, but he not likely to do so. Number three, right? You're the one who I remember now. You're the one who really zeroed in on this line between fantasy and science fiction, and I agree. I think it is more fantasy than it is science fiction, but there is, as you pointed out, some science going on. Here, you refer to the astronomy and things like that. And I like the comment you make right at the end of there, where you sort of are paraphrasing the eagle, who essentially is saying you're book smart but not life smart. Right? You've stared at books until your eyes cross. You've read about every great love story in literature, but have you kissed a girl ever? Are you really? Uh, and Chaucer's very going to be very interested in the Canterbury Tales in this question of authority. Does authority come from books and scripture, but also classical authors and things like that, or does it come from experience? Which is better? Is it better? The wife of Bath is really big on this. She says it's not the case that she's an authority she's an authority on marriage because she has so much experience. She is not an authority in the sense that the priests who write books on marriage are, but of course they haven't been married. So experience and authority. And here, right, I think Chaucer, the narrator, is coming out on the not very accomplished side of things. Number four, the difference between the places and the architecture. Right, how fleeting, fickle, and arbitrary fame truly is, and that's right. I mean, none of the buildings is extremely firm. Even the Temple of Venus is made out of glass, which I think is beautiful but treacherous. Then, of course, the House of Fame, built on the foundation of ice, and then the Wicker House. Um, yeah, you've got this comment about Calliope, about the muse singing around Fame's throne, and yeah, the beast of Revelation. And of course, I mean, the image of supplicants or disciples sitting around a seat and praising is a pretty common one. Um, but I wouldn't put it past Chaucer that there's some little sort of burlesque of Revelation going on here. I think that sounds like something he would do. Um, you do get into the composition of the pillars in the palace: iron, lead, copper, tin, and some of them. I think Latoon. There were some things that were actually alloys of different metals put together, and there. I mean, there are commentaries on this that talk about what each one means, but it's certainly nothing that I'm super familiar with. Um, but as you point out, these metals, which represent the historians, they're not steel. They're not cast iron, except for maybe one of them. They're mostly, if you think about a tin and copper alloy, that's something that's malleable. It's soft. It's something that can be manipulated and eventually broken. So I think you're astute to see that. Sarah Ann has written. Yeah, we're still kind of in this thing about whether history or literature is more authoritative, and I like the fact that this debate has continued all the way through because I think that Chaucer is not necessarily taken a side. I think Chaucer is more pointing out to us the flaws of both of those things, of each of those things, and not necessarily making an argument that one is particularly better than the other. Um, you compliment her on the citation of the text, and yes, that is something that I noticed. That anytime you're trying to prove something about a text, the best evidence is going to come from the text itself, and that's true whether you're in a discussion or whether you're writing a paper. I'd encourage everybody to do that. I like it helps me to see where you're getting your thoughts from, and everybody else as well. And once again, we like your analysis of the Palace of Fame. Uh, Becca enjoys your response to number one. Right, and she's getting at this idea once again that history is seen kind of masquerades as being objective, but the truth is that whoever the historian is who's going to influence the way that it reads. Um, Number two, I can see why Chaucer is considered an early psychologist. And when we get into the Canterbury Tales, we'll talk about that a lot. There are people who've argued that one reason that Chaucer survives a lot more strongly in our culture than other medieval authors, take someone like Lydgate or John Gower, both of whom were almost as popular as Chaucer in his time. They've not survived, and one reason that's been given for that is Chaucer really does write about characters. His stories and works are character centered and psychology centered, and the other authors are more allegorical or they might be more plot oriented. And the contention, there's a good essay by Lee Patterson about this. I might send that to y'all, where he talks about the fact that the 20th century, the 21st century, we're very much into character, that our movies and our shows and our books are all about characters. The very idea of the novel is generally imagined to be about a central character and how that person changes or is changed over the course of the narrative. So that one reason that we continue to embrace Chaucer and not these other authors is because he just happened to be centered on the topic that is the topic that we like to read about. I think you're right about that, and I think that looking at Chaucer as kind of a proto paleo psychologist is worthwhile, and we'll do that some when we look at Canterbury Tales. And finally, Susanna writing about you point out the idea of historical fiction, and I think that struck me as really apt because honestly, a lot of what passed for history then we really would almost read as historical fiction. Not necessarily that they've got these sort of fictional characters that they talk through, but that a lot of it is imaginative and they have conversations and actions are described and clothing is described and things that the historian could not possibly know are put in there. But the idea is that if you convey the gist of it, that's really what's important more than the facts. I I know what class you're talking about. In number two, you must be talking. Well, no, as you say, it's a comp class. I was thinking that would be Dr. Hobbes's Death in American Culture class, but I bet it was Dr. Hobbes's class nonetheless. Um, yeah, was this on Chaucer's bucket list? I don't know. That's a good. Let me go back up here to this. Um, because Chaucer, does this represent Chaucer's own literary ambition? I don't know. I think Chaucer pretty much knows that he's Chaucer. He knows that he's good in the same way that Shakespeare seemed to know that he was Shakespeare. And he does throw a lot of modesty our way in terms of his dopey little narrator, but I think that's pretty tongue-in-cheek. I don't think he would be surprised at how famous he is. Number three, I guess I hadn't thought about the fact that Eagle accomplished flying into space. I don't know at what point they make a distinction between the sky and outer space. I don't know when that happens in science history. Because when the eagle flies, I mean, I guess what we're looking at is the fact that he flies up to the stars. And honestly, I guess what it is when you hit the first sphere. The idea of the cosmos, the Earth is at the center, and that it's surrounded by 9 crystal spheres, which contain the sun, the moon, the whatever 6 planets that they knew, and then the last one contains the stars. So yeah, I don't know, but that's not the universe the Greek myths would have used. So yeah, I don't really know. I don't know if hitting space as opposed to being in the sky was a concept that they would have had. Chaucer probably has it though, like I said, with the idea of the celestial spheres. And finally, oh yeah, your comment about the muse that Calliope is singing. I don't know if we should make too much out of that. I think that Calliope is a muse, and that muses were inspirers, but also Calliope is the goddess of song, and so I. It doesn't necessarily strike me that she's fulfilling a muse role at this point in terms of being an inspirer. And so the fact that she's not with Chaucer, I don't necessarily think I want to make too much out of. I think here she's just kind of functioning in her role as a songstress. But I do think it's significant she's in the House of Fame because a lot of people's fame was spread through song and ballad and things like that back before there were tweets and TV shows and gossip columns and things like that. So I think that's what Calliope is doing there, but I don't think I want to give her too much more significance right there. Okay, these were great, and you made me think about some things that I hadn't thought about before. Um, I enjoy these. I will, yeah, obviously, I'll let you know when I upload them. When I upload them, I'll also send you directions about what else to do. We're reading the Parliament of Fowls next, and the Parliament of Fowls, believe it or not, is actually kind of where Chaucer invents Valentine's Day. So whether you love or hate Valentine's Day, you can blame Chaucer and the work that you can read. I tried to program it so we would actually read it on Valentine's week, but it didn't. It didn't happen that way. But it's. I think you'll like it. It takes some of the elements of House of Fame and Book of the Duchess, but he writes in a much more compact style. There's less rambling. There's less confusion, and it's kind of funny and kind of charming, and I think you'll like it. So thanks again for all your work, and I will be in touch with you soon.